We're going to cut out our egg now, and again we're going to cut it out of the tracing paper first, and then we're going to cut it out of the leather. So we're just going to cut our little cracked egg there. Okay, and then we can cut our cracked egg here as well. Now I do have to be a little bit careful with our leg area, because that's when it gets slightly tricky, because obviously you do need to cut slightly up into the leather, but all I'm going to do is just cut one slit. So when I get down to there with the paper now, all I'm going to do is just cut straight across that leg. I'm not actually going to cut it out. So I'll just come around the bottom nice and smoothly. Now obviously this is the tracing paper that I use to tack on, so it's a little bit of a weird cut. There we go. Okay, so there's our two little shapes, and now we're just going to cut those out of the leather as well. So we'll take our nice orange piece of leather and we're going to cut. Now make sure that you get these the right way round. That's quite key. Okay, so in actual fact that's that way round. So always think about which way round in the leather you're actually going to be cutting, because there's nothing worse than having an odd shaped piece of leather that you need to cut out, and then once you've cut it out, finding out it's the wrong way round. I think a lot of ladies will testify that they have possibly done that at least once in their lives. What's sometimes good to do is to actually write an R on there, and then you know which is the right side. That sometimes makes it a lot easier. You can work out which way it is then. Just going to snip into that leather like that, and then a little tiny bit there, and then I'm just going to cut it across that way, and that gets our little V's. Let's just take that off now, because it doesn't quite matter if your egg cracks aren't exactly the same as what we've got there on the drawing. They can be slightly different. You know, it's your own interpretation of the design as well. Okay, so let's just cut our next piece out. So I'm just going to place it just there, so it's using the most of that leather that we can possibly do. Okay, so we're just going to come, I'm going to cut around there on the bottom of our egg, and then we're going to again come up to the top, and obviously there's more jaggedy edges, so again I'm just going to cut across the top. It makes it much easier to then use your scissors when you're cutting in at angles. So we're just going to cut in like that into those little V's, and then we can just cut in the opposite direction. Okay, so I'm just going to cut there, that takes that piece out, cut there at a little bit more of an angle, cut there. Okay, so we're just going to finish off our little bit of cracked egg. Okay, always make sure that you're cutting off, because sometimes it's gone at a slightly different angle than you thought you needed to be at. and then it's not quite cut in the right place. You don't want to overcut too much because you'll be able to see that line, but you want to make sure that you cut enough so that you cut it out. So we've got our last little bit, and there are our pieces. Okay, so we've got piece 1 and piece 2 just under there. Okay, so now we need to just stitch those onto the fabric. Okay, so I've laid our leather in place, and all we need to do is stitch around the outside of our leather. We're not stitching along this top area, we're just stitching the outside. Okay, so I'm just going to come into the leather there. Okay, and we're using a leather needle, and we need to do nice little stitches. And again, as per the felt, you need to make sure that they're not too far in because it will look like a pasty, but also you want them to be slightly closer to the edge than they were when you were going into the felt, and that makes for much nicer edge into your leather and less noticeable stitching. Okay, so we're going to come round just like this, and when I've done a couple more stitches, I'm just going to assess where those legs need to be, because as I said earlier, we need 2 little slits where those legs are in our leather. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this other side down now. I'm going to assess where our legs are, and I'm going to cut into the leather 2 little slits. I'm just going to assess now with the tracing whether they are the right height. So I'm just going to take the little piece of tracing that I've actually used to cut out. That's the wrong way around. Okay, so this is the right way around. So it's not very far in, and I think that's just about right. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I've cut far enough in. I'm holding this quite tightly over this side. Okay, and you'll see our leather just nicely forms over that felt area there. Okay, now you need to make sure that once you've sewn this leather down that you do take out those tacking stitches, because they were a guide as to where our leather needed to be, and they potentially will be noticeable. As you can see on here, they are noticeable, so you may need to unpick them if you can see them. Okay, so we're just going to stitch this part of the leg down now, this side of the leg, and then we're going to stitch down this side of the leg. Okay. Okay, so we're just carrying on around our leather here, little stitches. Now sometimes it's quite good if you're coming up and you're going into an area that's padded, sometimes it will push away, can you see? So sometimes what you want to do is just poke into it just a little bit, draw your needle back and then bring it forward so it's further away from that felt. And we're just going to carry on. So I'm just going to poke in and then move it away. And that's the best way of getting it to try and stay on the line. But don't forget that we've cut out this piece of leather, and we've cut it out on the outer rim of that tracing, but of course it's going over quite a few layers of felt, so it does potentially form around that area. Okay, so let's just carry on over the other side of our leg. And again, I'm just pulling it slightly out. Okay, then we're going to go over the egg with a little bit of passing thread to add some decoration as well, and then we're going to do our legs, and that will be our little chick completed. We've done our little face as well. So just a few more stitches and then our egg will be completely finished all the way around with our stitches. Okay, so probably about 5 more stitches now. Just trying to hold that edge down to make sure that it stays perfectly in place and it doesn't move at all. And you can see that it's forming more round here than it is here, because obviously that's where we've put more of the padding, but that's fine because that's where our chick's body is, and it's popping it out of our egg. So that's perfect. Okay, so that's our last stitch there. Then we just need to stitch up here. So I'm just going to do a couple of stay stitches down here, and then I'm going to start stitching up there. Okay, so I've done our couple of stay stitches, just starting to stitch up and around our head area now. Okay, and again little stitches just coming up and around our head area. So we're just going to do probably about 12 stitches, something along that line, and then I think I'll just have enough thread. That's the worst thing sometimes when you're stitching. You just get to the end and you realise that you're about 2 inches short and you just need 2 inches more of thread. Very annoying. So we're just going to come round, stitch down, round our little head there, and then we've finished our egg shape. Okay. And then we can just finish this side off as well. Okay. I don't know whether I'm going to have enough thread. I think I might be running out. It's getting very short here. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. Obviously not, because I'm holding the leather with my fingers. I'll cross my legs instead. Not that that means anything whatsoever. Okay, so there we go. It's just 1, 2 more stitches and then we're done. Okay, super. So that's our little egg there, our little chick, and then we just need to do a little bit of detail on our egg here, and we need to put our legs on and add our face.